Hey everybody, welcome to Off the Show Board Game Reviews. In this video we're going to be teaching you how to play the game of Hyperborea using the Light and Shadow expansion. Also I'm going to show you some sample gameplay and show you exactly how this modifies the original game of Hyperborea. If all you're really looking for though is a quick overview of the game or my review of what the expansion adds to the game, check out the other videos in the series. After the break, come on back. I'm going to teach you exactly how to play the game and show you some gameplay for a game that is my top 51 games of all time. Actually pretty darn high up in that video series itself. In this video, I'm kind of assuming that you already know how to play Hyperborea. If you don't, check out the other video series I have for Hyperborea where I actually teach you how to play the game, go over some sample gameplay, and give my review for a game that is really fantastic. But the game of Hyperborea, Light and Shadow, adds a couple things to the basic game. Now this is a modular expansion. There's basically 3 modules that come with this expansion. The first module is going to be new racial powers for all the single races. The second thing are going to be the crypts and the relics, and the third thing is going to be the light and the shadow, which the game is named after itself. You're also going to get some new endgame victory conditions for the game. You're still only going to pick 3 endgame victory conditions, whether you're playing the short, the medium, or the long game. You're still only picking 3 of the endgame victory conditions. Now check out my review where I actually recommend you take 4 of them, and I'll explain it when I talk about in my review itself, but the actual rules for itself say you're still going to pick 3 of the victory conditions. Next thing you're going to do is players are going to pick their powers, then we're going to fill up the relics on all the borderlands. I'll explain how all that works in just a moment. But let's go ahead and start things really right from the beginning with the light and the shadow itself. Now the light and the shadow adds new cubes to the game. Now these new cubes are kind of a double-edged sword. They give you more options and more possibilities, but they are not worth any victory points at all, so they are definitely a double-edged sword. You can definitely add them to your bag and add them into your bag building strategies and your tactics, but understand that they're going to hamper you in a little bit because you're gaining extra mobility and options at the sacrifice of victory points. And the way these cubes are going to work is you are going to have your white or your light cubes, which can be on any square, whether it's a basic technology or one of the advanced technologies, but they can go on any multicolored square location. If you place them there, they're going to act like any colored cube that went on this location. But the nice thing about the light cube is anytime you place a light cube on a basic or advanced category or advanced technology, you can draw from the bag and draw 1 cube out and get more cubes to do extra actions with. Now if you're an advanced Hyperborea player, you definitely understand the concept of emptying out your bag as quickly as possible can be a very strong strategy, because the quicker that ends out, the quicker you get to your reset. The quicker you reset, the quicker your miniatures are much more available for future actions. So that's why the light cube is very powerful. It can take the place of any multicolor spot, and the moment you place it, you're going to draw 1 more cube out of your bag. Now the other end of the spectrum, pun intended, is going to be the shadow cubes. Now shadow cubes can take the place of any single color location except for gray. So that means that a black cube can be green, red, purple, orange, yellow, or blue on a basic technology, or on advanced technology. Again, you're simply going to place it on your board. Or any advanced technologies that you happen to have. The trick with the black cubes though is even though they can go on any single color, they don't allow you to draw from the bag. So the light cubes, they go on any multicolor spot, but they allow you to draw from the bag. All the dark cubes can take the place of any single color slot except for gray, again giving you many more options, but again the fact that you're going to sacrifice the fact that these cubes are not worth victory points at the end of the game. The next thing we're going to add to the game are the different ending victory conditions for the game with this expansion. The first one is if you start your turn and you are the only person with any miniatures in the center tile. Yes, that does mean ghosts. If there are any ghosts on center tile, that's going to prevent you from getting this. But if you're the only person with any miniatures in the center tile at the start of your turn, you can claim this victory tile. And again, that's one of the endgame victory conditions, also worth 2 victory points. The next thing we have is the ability, if you are the person who defeats the last ghost on the board, you're going to gain this victory tile. Now be very careful with the act of terraforming. We can eventually add extra ghosts back onto the board, and if that does happen, that does mean that multiple people can claim this victory condition. But just understand, if you're the first person to knock all the ghosts off the board and nobody terraforms, you're going to gain that victory point until somebody terraforms to bring out some more ghosts. Next up, we have the relic victory condition. Now this requires you to possess 4 crypt relics out there on the board. Now if you look at the board, you understand there's only 6 of these available at the start of the game. The good news is that you get more of these anytime you add a Borderlands tile to the board. I'll show you how to do that with terraforming. The bad news is that there is a very limited supply, which means that these are much more challenging victory conditions to obtain, and you have to have 4 of these relics. Now there is an addendum, and I'll cover that in the review, and also mention again why I actually like to play with 4 any victory conditions. Again, I'll cover that all in the review. But while the rulebook doesn't cover this, there was a addendum FAQ brought up by the designer saying that if you are playing a game and you are unable for anybody to get that 4th relic, the first person who claims the last relic on the board will be the person who takes this. That does mean that this is kind of a race with some of these ending victory conditions, especially with the ghost and the 4 relics, because it's not every game where every single player is going to be able to get all these end victory conditions. So again, it changes up the strategies and the tactics and the way you're going to play the game. But the little caveat of this, I'm going to talk about this in review of a little idea I have with both these endgame victory condition tiles that I use as a personal home rule. Finally, as a nice bonus for people who pre-ordered, and I think this is still going to be available in other copies of the game, this is a bonus victory tile that says if you gain a level 1, level 2, a level 3, and a level 4 tech out there in your empire, you're also going to close out and score this victory tile right here. Again, these are all the new victory tiles for any victory points. We're not going to change up the rules. If you follow the basic rules of the game, you're simply going to pick 3 of these among the 7 that are now available to choose what kind of victory conditions you can choose to end up your game or to close out the game to bring about the end of Hyperborea. The next thing we have besides the new racial powers are going to be the crypts and the relics. Now the crypts and the relics are very interesting. Anytime you have a Borderlands tile that is ever added into the board, and that's very important because when you terraform, you're going to add in more Borderland tiles. But anytime a new Borderlands tile is added in the game, you're going to add one of these crypts and these relics onto the board. Now, since we start with 6 Borderland tiles at the start of the game, that means we're going to start with 6 of these crypts and relics in the game. And they come into play face down, so you don't know exactly which crypts and relics are at each location. Now, there's pretty much 3 different kinds of crypts and relics. The first one is a terraforming one, which means that when you pick this one up, you are simply going to take this relic and you're going to add it to your empire. This is a one-time use relic. And when you claim it, you can use it at any time during your turn. To do so, you're simply going to flip it over to signify that you have used this power, and you're going to go to the tile stack, and you're going to pick out 3 tiles from the tile stack, and you are going to decide to place this tile out in the board in place of a different tile, or you're going to add it connected to a current Borderlands tile. So the trick here is to understand that in a 6-player game, since we're going to surround all the Borderland tiles, that means we are not going to build the board up bigger in a 6-player game. But in 5-player games or on lower player count games, we can definitely start spreading the board out even further. Now the cool thing about doing this is every time we do this, if we add out locations such as the ones that are give us ruins, we are going to put the ruin tokens on those locations, we are going to add out cities on those locations, and yes, we are even going to add out ghosts on those locations. So that is a cool thing about terraforming. Terraforming allows us to add extra tiles to the board. It also allows us to replace tiles on the board that have already been revealed and simply take everything about that tile that has not been claimed, remove it from the game, and then everything else we're going to add in replacing of it with the brand new tile we add to that specific location. Now if we happen to have multiple units on that specific tile when we terraform it, they're all going to be moved to the new tile. All of them will be outside of ruins, outside of cities, making this ripe for taking for anybody else who wants to come in there and take that location and take all the resources from that specific location. Again, when we terraform, grab 3 tiles, and we're either going to build onto the Borderlands or we're going to replace a current Borderlands tile on the board. And don't forget, when we add another Borderlands tile, it's going to come out with another relic or crypt, meaning that there may be multiple opportunities to keep terraforming as long as we keep adding out the right relics and crypts onto the board. The next one we are going to have is the one that's going to allow us to clone another race's powers. Now these may be colored racial powers, but that does not mean that's unique to your specific faction. You can actually clone another nation's power, and if you gain this relic, you're simply going to add it to your empire to remind everybody that you now have access to this power, and then you are going to claim this token. Again, I must emphasize, you can take the powers from the other races. This is not only available to green, this is available to all other races. And now for the rest of the game, this is a permanent power added onto your empire that can be given to one unit when that unit is added to the board. So if I add a unit onto the board, I can decide to give it this power, and as long as this one unit is on the board, it has this special power. You know, all the different races come with their own special powers. They're all listed in the book right here very easily, and as long as you keep that race or that unit on the board, it's going to keep that power. If that unit is eliminated, you're going to get that token back onto your board, and when you add your next unit on the board, you're more than welcome to bring it back into play with that specific power all over again, meaning that you permanently have access to this power. Unlike the terraforming, which is a one-time use, these racial powers are a boon to your empire that you can continue to add to your units as long as you keep spreading out onto the board and adding more units onto the board. The final thing we are going to have is we're going to have the ability of necromancy, where we can take the ghosts of the past and we can sacrifice them to gain temporary boons. Now again, just like terraforming, these are one-time use relic crypts, and what we will be doing to use these is we are going to permanently sacrifice ghosts that we have defeated. They will be removed from the game, which does mean we are sacrificing victory points for a one-time gain or bonus. And to use it, we will simply sacrifice the ghost and we will flip over that relic to signify that we have used that relic, and we will gain whatever bonus that happens to be. Again, I'm not going to bore you by going over all these single powers because they're all listed here, but you're basically going to get the ability to teleport, attack, generate more units, or maybe even do some cube drops from the bag. And again, terraforming and the racial powers are all listed right here. I'm not going to bore you by going over them. They're all very plainly listed in the rule book. But while I got your attention about the rulebook, I do want to mention that unfortunately we do have a couple errors in the rulebook, and they have managed to fall through, so I might as well cover them really quick right here because they may cause some confusion for you if you're not familiar with the errors there in the book. The first thing I want to tell you is that anytime the rules in this rulebook tell you to do a cube generation, it's actually a cube draw. You're not going to take a cube from the backup pile. Whenever it tells you to do this, you're basically going to draw a cube from your bag. It's not a generation, it's actually a cube draw. And if you actually look at the tokens show it correctly, it's just the rulebook itself that's incorrect. So you see where it says for light cube, it creates a cube draw, not a cube generation. Also, we have the little addendum I've already explained to you about the relics, where I'll come back and cover a little better here in just a second actually. And then we're also going to see that the blue power is not a cube generation, it's actually a cube draw. And that also carries on finally when it does come to the racial powers. For the celestial reign, it's not a cube generation, it is a cube draw for their special power. So I just want to cover that really quickly before I forget that there are a couple errors in the rulebook. Understand the rules are cube draws, not cube generations. Now that I've explained to you how the extra rules change up the game of Hyperborea with the light and shadow expansion, I'm going to show you exactly how to set up the game. Now again, I'm kind of assuming you know how to play basic Hyperborea. If you don't, check out the other videos in the series that tells you how to play the basic Hyperborea game. I'm going to show you exactly how to set up the game here really quick. And then we're going to close out this tutorial video, and then we're going to go ahead and do a separate gameplay video where I'm going to show you exactly how the game plays with the expansion, so you can see the extra changes, the extra strategies, and the extra tactics and how it's different for Hyperborea. And of course, you know, once this is all done, check out the final video, which is going to be a review video for the series, and that'll close out the entire series for Hyperborea Light and Shadow. So when we're setting up the game, we're going to be setting up the game just like we normally would, checking out the rulebook depending on the amount of players we have. We're going to have our standard center tile, we're going to have our standard borderland tiles, and again, we're going to have all our races out here, whether we're playing with the asymmetric racial powers or we're playing with the basic powers. The next thing we need to do is we need to decide exactly which endgame victory conditions we're going to go for. Now again, the rules still say that you're going to pick 3 endgame conditions. I personally now pick 4 endgame conditions because I like how some of these endgame conditions can be a first come first serve, which can create a challenge for the game. The unfortunate thing about this though is that I do like to play this game as a 5 or 6 player game, and I also like to play it the long game. So there is a potential for a stalemate, unwinnable game where you can't close it out. It's a very, very small chance this can happen, and I'll talk about in my review, but it's one of the main reasons why I like to pick 4 in-game victory conditions. So if that's what you want to do, I suggest picking 4, but the book does definitely tell you to pick 3 in-game victory conditions. And you're basically going to pick from the original or one of the 4. You're going to pick 3 of those endgame victory conditions. And then once you pick those endgame victory conditions, you're going to remove the other ones from the game. And these are the ones we're going to use to close out the game, whether we're playing a short, a medium, or we happen to be playing a long game. The next thing we need to figure out is we need to figure out how many light and how many shadow cubes we'll have in the game. Now understand this is a community pile of light and shadow cubes, and that is a finite number of cubes that's available in the game. That's going to be based on the amount of players. It's the amount of players in the game times Q2 for each pile of cubes. So in a 3-player game, we're going to have exactly 6 light cubes, and then we are going to have exactly 6 dark cubes. The rest of the cubes we're going to remove from the game. No player can gain those cubes. And again, I want to emphasize these piles of cubes are definitely a first come, first serve. So it is possible to have a very aggressive strategy where you gain a whole bunch of cubes that the other players don't gain access to. And again, first come, first serve. If you want to grab a whole bunch of these, play that way and add these cubes in your bag, you are more than welcome to do so. That is a finite supply of those cubes. Work as hard as you want, or as not as hard as you can. Remember, those cubes are definitely a double-edged sword. They give you a lot of options, but they also take away potential victory points that you may be going for in the game itself. Now the next thing you're going to do is you're going to set up your racial board as normal with the 3, the 2, the 1, and a whole bunch of zeros. You're going to fill out the board as normal, and then remember, every time we have any Borderlands tile, you will need to put out one of these crypts face down with you, so you do not know exactly what happens to be on the other side, what relics on the other side of these specific crypts. And again, I must emphasize, anytime we add another Borderlands tile, whether it's through terraforming, we are always going to bring out that new Borderlands tile with another crypt face down, so we don't know exactly what crypt happens to be on that location. So our Borderland tiles only, not for the center tile, and again, not for our homeland tiles at all. It's only for those itself. Next thing we need to do is we need to make sure that we pick our new racial powers that we want to do. What I like to do is have everybody look at the racial powers, pick the one they want to use, and place it face down, and then once everybody's picked the racial powers, then everybody reveal at the same time. The reason why I like to do this is because if you played Hyperborea enough, you definitely know that the race can be part of your strategy. Know what races you are playing, what races you're playing against, and where those races are positioned around in reference to where your empire happens to be is definitely part of the strategy of the game. So for me, I like to look at my opponents, the color of armies I'm playing against, and knowing their potential army powers, and that's usually what I use to pick my power. And then I'll play it face down, and then once everybody's picked their power, I will go ahead and reveal, and everybody will know the powers available for their specific armies in this game. And again, the other army powers will be removed from the game. They're not available anymore. The only thing left to explain to you is how to gain the light and the shadow cubes themselves, and those are gained through your tech tree, just like normal. Remember how in the basic game, whenever you reach to the level 4 or the level 5, you can gain 1 cube of that color. If you happen to manage to get your tech tree all the way up to level 6, you get to gain 2 cubes of that color. Well, anytime now, from now on, if you're playing with light and shadow, instead of taking the 1 cube of that color or the 2 cubes of that color, you can instead replace one of those gained cubes with either a light cube or a dark cube. That does mean if I decide to turn in this level 6 red cube, I can turn in for 1 light or 1 dark plus 1 red, or I can still gain my 2 red cubes as normal, just by simply turning that in like the normal tech tree you would. Or I can turn this blue one, and since it only happened to get level 4 or 5, I can gain 1 blue cube, or 1 light cube, or 1 shadow cube. Again, when you start lowering these tech trees down, you can take 1 standard color cube like you normally will, or you replace one of those colored cubes with 1 light or 1 dark. You can't take 2 light, you can't take 2 dark, it's 1 only. And again, you can only do that with the tech trees. You can't do that with any of these special relic abilities that allow you to gain cubes. The only way you get these light and these dark cubes are by turning your tech trees, which means, again, you're risking and you're sacrificing your victory points. Now, I don't want this video to go overly long, and bringing out Hyperborea makes me want to play the game again because I enjoy this game so immensely. It's just one of my, not some of my top 51 games of all time. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm actually going to close out this tutorial video here and keep the tutorials as a separate video. And then what we're going to do is I'm going to have a third video, just do my normal format here, and I'm going to actually show you some gameplay for the game. Going to set everything up for a 3-player game. We'll go ahead and go with the green, the yellow versus the blue, since they're the ones I have out already. And then I'll show you a complete, well, maybe not a complete game, depends how long it goes, but I'll show you some sample gameplay and get enough exploration so you can see the relics in play, see the strategy in play, and just see how the different racial powers happen to be in play and how they all interact and change up the strategies and the tactics of this game that is very strategic and also very tactical at the same time. Again, if you played the game before, you know exactly what I mean. Hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed this video series. If you have any comments or questions, as always, make sure you leave them down in the YouTube comments down below. I'll definitely get to them as quickly as I can. You can also feel free to email me at offtheshelfboardgamereviews. That's otsbgr@gmail.com. Be sure to answer emails as quickly as I can. If you enjoy this video and you enjoy this video series, think about tossing $1 over in the tip jar over at Patreon. That's patreon.com/otsbgr. Your dollar in the tip jar can help me cover my costs and also help keep the lights on. If you enjoy this video, if you enjoy this video series, click that like button, click that subscribe button. As always, thanks for watching.